because everybody thinks it's the other side.
Yeah.
Like, we're perfect.
We're
and
perfect.
They're messed up.
Right.
And if we could only force them to be just like us, everything would be fine. Or if they would just shut the fuck up
and go away,
and
then we
just go
could do what
along
we need to do.
Yes, go along
Right.
with whatever we want.
And this is one, and I don't want to insult anybody, but this is that's fundamentally childish, right? If I can't have it my way, then I'm gonna screw you guys. I'm going home. And so, really, my fixation, like now and today and in this moment, is if we're going to do anything about this, we need to be able to talk, right?
Yeah.
And we need to be able to talk about the shit and the stuff that actually impacts our lives, that causes us distress, that creates the conditions of, and this is something I'll bang on about, you've heard me bang on it before, and I will bang on it again, scarcity. We have, there was a time when 40-hour work week was more than enough to pay your bills. And then you had time to go home and tend to the yard and do all this stuff. And frankly, the economics of that time meant that somebody at that time, more often than not, the wife would stay home, right? So the kids were already home from school. They'd had their snacks. They were sitting down. They were getting their homework done, and dinner was already on the table. So there was an abundance of time, right, outside of the work week. But slowly but inexorably, sort of like the frog in the pot of boiling water, it's gotten to the point where if somebody chose that old school way of life where there was a stay-at-home parent and then one went and worked, that's not an economic possibility anymore. Everybody is out there putting in 40 hours a week. Oh, wait, but even 40 hours a week from two people isn't enough, right? So just as one example, this is something that literally affects everyone. And
except the billionaires.
Except the billionaire class. There's nothing none of the stuff we're talking about that affects real people. They get to live their own reality, their very different reality. And if we as a people are ever going to stand a chance of doing anything to fix that reality, we have to be able to have conversations with one another. And it's like anymore, we can't, because the civic dialogue in this country, the conversations that we have been loaded with 1,000,001 little landmines that are almost like scientifically designed to shut down any conversation. If you and I wanted to sit here and talk about the Second Amendment, for example, right? If one of us was on the left and one of us was on the right, the conversation, whatever we were talking about, would stop, and we'd spend the next 2 hours yelling at each other about the Second Amendment. Or if we wanted to talk about climate change, one of us was on the left and one of us on the right. Whatever else we were talking about just gets brushed under the rug, and we're going to spend the next hour frustratedly explaining why climate change is bullshit or why it's an existential threat. And we're going to walk away frustrated going, well, that person's a moron, not worth my time. And meanwhile, the bigger conversations about the economic reality that affect us all, the scarcity of time, the degradation of community and time with family, and just let's talk about falling birth rates and falling marriage rates and the housing unaffordability crisis. These are things that really matter, not gender pronouns, not the DEI program at that Fortune 500 company. Like, those things, although they're not completely inconsequential, that's not what really matters. That's like worrying about what color you're going to paint your house when you don't even have the money for your mortgage. Like, that's what so much of the conversation gets stuck in, and all these poison pills that exist within our cultural dialogue.
Well, I think your point earlier was that that's by design. The people who control the media, the people who control the political, the sort of incestuous relationship between politics and business, it's to their advantage to dumb everybody down, to get everybody mired in conversations that don't matter, so that they don't have time or thought left over to figure out how they're being screwed over by the people on the levers of power.
Yeah. So the only thing I would push back a little bit is like when you say the things that don't matter, because when we talk about these distractions, these landmines, a lot of times they do matter. They're very, you're talking about like pro-life versus pro-choice.
Sure.
That really
That
matters
really
to
does
people,
matter.
but it has the importance of these subjects in our national dialogue have been elevated intentionally, I believe, by the people that control the purse strings for that. I mean, even independent media online, use for example, use the Daily Wire as an example. For those of you who aren't aware, it's a right-wing media platform. I think it's where Ben Shapiro got his start. Just using them as an example, their seed money and their funding largely comes from the oil, gas, and fracking industry. So however you feel about that, the people who pay the bills get final say in the conversations that they are or are not going to have. So the common thread I see between all of these landmines and these poison pills that obstruct us from having decent conversation is they are largely and overwhelmingly cultural. Okay? And something that I've learned in my experiences in life is that your culture is largely based on what zip code were you raised in. If I think using you and I for an example, you were raised in what I think would be considered maybe an affluent or upper middle class zip code.
Yeah, middle, upper.
Compared to, even though my folks worked and they gave me a good life, the zip code that I grew up in was predominantly lower income, lower middle class. I had a lot of friends who were on like government assistance and welfare and things like that. And the school that I was in was very underfunded. So just using two people who are not terribly different and only grew up less than 10 miles from each other, there was a very different lived experience between the two. So you have a particular culture and I have a slightly different culture. Now then you stretch that across the entire country. In my mind, and one could argue about it, I feel like we have 5 distinct different countries. And just to keep it simple, we'll pick on, say, 3 of them. You have your Midwest industrial Rust Belt, factory Joe, and everything comes from that. You like your classic rock, you like your old muscle cars, you like, your Budweiser beer and your Jack Daniels. And then you've got your country culture, which is all about pickup trucks, and they share that in common, the Jack Daniels and their Budweiser. But instead of Marlboro Reds, it's Skoal Long Cut. And then you've got your, say, liberal West Coast city, where it's now, instead of Budweiser, it's some microbrew from Rogue Brewing, or instead of Skoal Long Cut or Marlboro Reds, it's going to be Nat Sherman's or Galois or maybe a Spliff. I don't know. But these are just little points on the differences in culture. But from that stems, what faith tradition do you follow? What are guns a part of your cultural heritage? Do you go hunting, or do you do target shooting? Or have you never owned a gun? Have you never seen a gun? Have you never touched a gun? And each of these different things is going to lead to a very different collection of feelings about any number of these subjects. Prayer in school, the use of the word one nation, or the term one nation under God in the Pledge of Allegiance, which, fun fact, that was only put in there in the last century. Prior to that, it was one nation under heaven. So, it didn't used to say, in God we trust on our money. Some people have a real problem with that. Other people think it's just hunky-dory. And this is entirely based on what zip code were you raised in, what faith tradition, what cultural touchstones were you raised with, and are you familiar with? So this is our culture, right? It's diverse, it's messy. You got the mods and the rockers and the greasers and the hipsters and all these other different people. They're all Americans. And we all live under the same economic system. But these organizations, these people with money, these people with power, these people with influence, who fund media organizations and have an influence over editorial policy, what they cover, what they don't cover, and how they cover it, have elevated the importance of culture in our national discourse. Not because they really care about faith tradition or traditional family values or mental health or any of these things. The whole reason these subjects have been elevated and amplified and screamed in our ears over and over and over again to make us feel angry or emotional or some way about these things is because they know that if they can keep us all arguing with each other about things that are very deeply and innately part of us and who we are and where we came from. You're terrible because you drive pickup trucks and shoot guns. Well, you're terrible because you ride a bike and you won't eat meat. As long as they can keep us arguing with each other or hating each other, inspiring us to hate each other because of these simple cultural differences, the less likely we are to recognize that the things that really make our lives more difficult, the things that really compromise our country's safety and security, are commonalities across all of these cultural things. Because you can't fix somebody's culture, right? So if they can keep us divided over the cultural issues, that means we never really start talking about the economic issues. We never really... it's a fact. Everybody can recognize there's a difference between a corporation, right, that has no loyalty or allegiance to any nation or any community. There's a difference between that and your local neighborhood bakery, your local family-owned hardware store. One of them is rooted in the community, shares values with the community, and stands to lose if the community loses. The other one does not, right? But that's a conversation I've never heard anybody in any position of power, any talking head sitting behind the desk at a media outlet, trying to draw a distinction between business and corporation. It all gets talked about as if it's one basket. So when, let's say, liberal economic policy butts against the ability for billionaires to continue to acquire more wealth, well, the media goes into action, and this happens on the left and the right, to lump your small neighborhood family business in with the corporation. See, they're going after your businesses. They're going to make it harder for you to do business. They're going to harm your profits. They're going to hurt you. So now it's not the 1%, the handful of 1,000 people in this country that have more money than they could possibly spend in their lifetime. Now they've got tens of thousands of small local family business owners who feel that those billionaires are their people. And so they need to close ranks with them to guard against this terrible policy. Okay? That's the way the organizations, the medias spin this and manipulate us.
Classic divide and conquer.
100%.
Yeah.
It's united we stand, divided we fall. It's the only political sticker I have on my car, because that is the most important thing, is that we recognize that we can be different and we can roll our eyes and we can chuckle about our fashion choices or what food we do or we don't eat. At the end of the day, we should just laugh about that stuff. We should have that sense of humor about the crazy cousin or the nutty uncle. These, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, but you can tell when people truly love and respect one another because they can tease each other. We're all a little bit ridiculous in some way. I've got this ridiculous beard, right? Serves no purpose. I choose it. The guys at work make fun of me about my beard all the time. They accuse me of sniffing it. I don't know who cares if you're sniffing your beard or what, but or people who want pink and blue hair, or like my boss, he's never been on a farm in his life, but he's always got these big, ridiculous cowboy boots on. We all love and respect one another. And so we are safe to give each other a hard time and razz each other for our idiosyncrasies and our quirks, right? When it gets to culture, we should just be able to roll our eyes and chuckle and still love people and still recognize that we're part of the same community, that we drive the same roads, that we go to the same schools, that we have the same kinds of dreams. We just want secure economic and physical security for us and the ones we love. And some of us dream of owning businesses. Some of us just dream of having the best lawn on the block. Like, we're all different. And that's awesome.